Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The moment she closed her eyes, everything changed. Maya had just stepped off the plane after a long, grueling international flight. Her body ached from sitting for hours on end, her mind still spinning from the chaos she had left behind. It wasn't an ideal time for travel, but she had no choice. Her life was in pieces, and the journey ahead was meant to be her escape, her chance to find some peace. The weight of her responsibilities and the crumbling pieces of her life had taken their toll. All she wanted was to sit still for a moment, to breathe without the constant pressure of the world around her. The subway station was packed with people, the usual rush of commuters weaving through the crowd, their faces tired and hurried. She barely registered the noise, the clatter of footsteps, the muttered conversations, the occasional shout over the public address system. All Maya could think about was the quiet she longed for. She made her way to the platform, her tired eyes scanning for a place to sit. The train hadn't yet arrived, and she was running on fumes. When the train finally pulled into the station, Maya barely acknowledged the passengers who poured off, the mass of bodies pushing their way into the open space. She just needed a seat. She needed a few minutes to collect herself before continuing on her way. And then, she saw it, a single empty seat near the door. She moved quickly, slipping past the crowd, her tired legs aching as she made her way to the spot. She sank down into the seat, grateful for the brief reprieve. The train doors slid shut behind her with a soft whoosh, and the train jolted into motion. She leaned back, allowing herself to relax for just a moment. Her eyelids fluttered shut, and for a brief second, the weight of the world lifted. The motion of the train, the gentle sway of the carriage, and the soft hum of the wheels on the tracks lulled her into a sense of drowsiness. Her body was tired, too tired, and her mind wandered, the thoughts that had been plaguing her for days slowly fading into the background. But then, something shifted. It was subtle at first, a soft brush of fabric against her shoulder, a warmth that wasn't there before. Maya opened her eyes briefly, confused, and glanced around. Her gaze fell on the man sitting beside her, but she barely registered him. She was too exhausted to care about who he was or why he had sat next to her. She hadn't even noticed when he had done so. He was just there. A stranger. But then again, weren't we all strangers in some way? The man's presence seemed oddly comforting, too comforting. Maybe it was just the exhaustion clouding her judgment, or maybe it was something deeper. Maya adjusted her position, moving slightly closer to the stranger's shoulder, seeking the solace of the unfamiliar warmth. The rhythm of the train lulled her again, and her eyelids grew heavier. She felt herself slipping further into sleep, her head now gently resting on the man's shoulder. There was something strange about the feeling, though, a nagging sense that it wasn't supposed to be like this. But the exhaustion won out, and Maya shut her eyes again, surrendering herself to the brief moment of peace. The stranger didn't move. Maya's breath slowed, her body relaxing further. Her shoulder pressed more firmly into his. She could feel his body heat, the softness of his jacket, the gentle motion as the train rocked back and forth. It felt safe, too safe. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a place she didn't want to leave. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. But was she really safe? She couldn't be sure. As she drifted in and out of sleep, her mind wandered to a series of memories. But they were all fragmented, images of her past, moments of her life before this chaos. She couldn't remember when it had all gone wrong, but there had been a shift. Everything had changed. She had felt herself slipping, but here, on this train, she was almost able to forget. The weight of her responsibilities, the guilt, the heartbreak, it all faded into the background. She could almost pretend she was someone else for just a few moments. The stranger beside her shifted slightly, and Maya flinched involuntarily. But he didn't seem to notice. He didn't even look at her. His attention was focused elsewhere, his posture relaxed. Maya took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs as she leaned back into the seat, closing her eyes once more. The train began to slow as it approached the next stop. Maya was jolted awake by the abrupt motion. She blinked rapidly, feeling disoriented. The warmth of the man's shoulder was still there, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt strange. The train doors slid open, and the sea of passengers began to shuffle out, their feet dragging as they made their way to the exits. Maya could hear them. Footsteps, chatter, the creaking of the train. She blinked again, trying to clear the haze from her mind, but something was off. Something about the man beside her wasn't right. She turned to look at him, still feeling a sense of confusion. His face was partly obscured by a scarf, but she could still make out the sharp lines of his jaw, the strong brow, and the dark eyes that looked almost calculating. The stranger's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile when he noticed her looking. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to move just yet." Maya felt a shiver run down her spine, but she couldn't explain why. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the man stood up abruptly, smoothing his jacket with one hand. Maya watched him carefully. He was dressed impeccably, too impeccably. His dark suit, polished shoes, and expensive-looking watch gave off an air of wealth and power. He looked out of place on this train. He looked out of place, period. She noticed the briefcase he carried. It was sleek, dark, and expensive. The kind of briefcase that didn't belong in a public space like this. There was something about him that didn't fit the ordinary world around them. And yet, he seemed so casual, so at ease. He took a step back, giving her room to get up. But Maya's body didn't respond. Something inside her told her not to move. She wasn't sure why. The man adjusted his cufflinks, the action almost deliberate. His movements were calm, calculated, too calculated. "You're safe," he said again, his voice carrying more weight now, deeper than before. There was something almost reassuring about the way he spoke, but it sent an unsettling chill down Maya's spine. She stared at him, speechless. Safe? What did he mean by that? He smiled again, the same smile that hadn't quite reached his eyes. Then, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred, he turned and walked toward the doors. The train was slowing to a halt. Without looking back, he disappeared into the crowd of commuters exiting the train. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The whole situation had felt wrong from the start, but now it felt even worse. She was still processing what had just happened, but something was missing. Her phone. The sudden realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She quickly reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing the fabric. Her breath hitched as she realized her phone was gone. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She checked the other pocket, the small compartment of her purse, but nothing. Her phone wasn't there. Had he taken it? Her eyes darted around the train, but the man was nowhere to be seen. He had vanished into the crowd with no trace. The train doors closed behind her with a soft whoosh, and the train jolted forward again. The passengers around her continued their journey as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. No one had noticed the exchange. No one had seen the brief, unsettling moment that had passed between them. Maya's heart raced in her chest, but she didn't know what to do. There were so many questions, but no answers. The man, who was he? Why had he spoken to her like that? And most importantly, why was her phone gone? She glanced down at her hands, empty. She should have noticed sooner. She should have been more careful. But it was too late now. The train rattled forward, carrying her into the unknown, and with it, the mystery of the man who had appeared out of nowhere. What had she missed? What had happened during that brief moment when she had let her guard down? She didn't know. But she had a sinking feeling that she would soon find out. The train doors opened at the next stop, and the flood of passengers surged out. Maya remained seated, her thoughts spiraling. The truth was out there, waiting. All she had to do was find it. And she would. But not yet. Not now. Not when she still didn't know who to trust. And not when she wasn't sure whether the man she had leaned on had stolen more than just her phone. Maya's heart raced as she stepped off the train at her stop, her mind still spinning with questions. She tried to focus on the people around her, the hustle and bustle of the crowded station, but everything felt distant. A fog seemed to have settled over her thoughts, clouding her sense of reality. She had always been sharp, quick to notice things, but today, something was off. Something felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. She checked her phone again, empty. Her heart sank. No, it couldn't be. She had been so sure that her phone was in her pocket when she'd boarded the train. But now it was gone. Vanished. The man. He had to have taken it. But why? And how had he done it so quickly, so smoothly? Maya's fingers shook as she walked out of the station and into the bright daylight. The cool breeze hit her face, but she barely registered it. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of the stranger. His face, his strange smile, the way he had spoken to her. Why had she let her guard down? Why hadn't she noticed when he had taken her phone? The question gnawed at her as she made her way down the busy street. It wasn't just the phone. It was the way the whole encounter had felt. Like something was missing, like a piece of the puzzle she hadn't seen. And now, that puzzle was haunting her. Maya didn't realize how far she had walked until she reached a familiar street. The old bakery she used to visit with her mother when she was a child stood just ahead. The sight of it should have been comforting, a small piece of her past in a world that felt increasingly foreign. But instead, it only reminded her of what she had lost, the safety of her childhood, the feeling that she knew where she was headed. Her mother had always told her to trust her instincts. But in that moment, Maya wasn't sure she could trust herself anymore. She had been so sure the man had taken her phone, but could she prove it? She had no evidence, no way of knowing for sure. All she had was the gnawing feeling in her gut telling her something wasn't right. And that, she realized, was the most unsettling thing of all. She stood outside the bakery for a few minutes, trying to gather her thoughts. The voices of the people around her seemed to blur together, and the world felt like it was moving too fast. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had just happened. But how? Maya pulled herself together. She couldn't stay here. She needed to move, to do something, anything to shake the fog from her mind. She needed to find out who that man was, what he wanted, and why he had crossed her path. With a deep breath, Maya turned away from the bakery and walked toward her apartment. It wasn't far, just a few blocks away. But each step felt like a mile as she thought about what had happened on the train. Her mind replayed every detail over and over, trying to make sense of it. She reached her building and climbed the stairs, her legs heavy with the weight of the day. When she reached her apartment door, she stopped. The silence on the other side felt thick, oppressive. She hadn't been home in days, and the thought of stepping back into her empty apartment felt like a weight on her chest. But she had no choice. She had to face it. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, the familiar scent of her space greeting her. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt cold, distant, as if the walls themselves had turned against her. She dropped her bag onto the couch and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The world outside was the same. But inside, everything felt different. Her phone. The man. Her gut. It all swirled together in a storm of confusion and fear. Maya knew she couldn't just sit here and wait for things to sort themselves out. She had to do something. But where to begin? She grabbed a cup of coffee from the counter and sat at the small table by the window. Her hands were still shaking, but she tried to steady them as she thought. She could call the police, file a report about the stolen phone. But there was no proof it had been stolen. She had nothing. Not even a name. Just the image of the man's face in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more the whole thing seemed impossible. It was so out of place. A man like that, sitting on a train, in the middle of the crowd, acting as though everything was perfectly normal? It didn't make sense. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if he had been watching her? What if he had known exactly who she was? Maya rubbed her temples, the headache from earlier returning. She had to stop spiraling. She couldn't let fear take over. She had to think clearly. She needed a plan. Her first thought was to retrace her steps. To go back to the station and see if she could find any clues, anything that might give her a hint about who the man was. Maybe someone had seen something. Maybe the surveillance cameras would have caught something. But as soon as the thought crossed her mind, she dismissed it. She couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until she had a better idea of what she was dealing with. Her next thought was to call her best friend, Sophie. Sophie had been Maya's confidant since they were kids. If anyone could help her make sense of the situation, it was Sophie. She reached for her phone, only to remember that it was gone. Frustrated, she stood up from the table and paced the room. How could she have been so careless? But no, this wasn't her fault. She had trusted someone she shouldn't have, and now, the consequences were unfolding before her. She didn't know who the man was, but she was starting to feel the weight of his presence in her life. He was out there, somewhere. And she needed to find him before he found her. Maya grabbed her coat and walked out of the apartment, determined to find answers. She didn't know where to start, but she couldn't just sit here and wait. She had to move forward. To take control of the situation, no matter how uncertain things felt. She walked down the stairs and out into the street, her mind focused on the task ahead. She had no plan, no idea what she was doing, but she couldn't stop. She had to find something, anything, to help her understand what was happening. The city was busy, the streets crowded with people, each of them absorbed in their own lives, their own problems. But Maya felt isolated, disconnected from everything around her. The faces of strangers blurred as she walked, her thoughts consumed by the man, by the strange events of the past few hours. She walked aimlessly, unsure of where she was going. She had no destination, no clear sense of direction. It was as if the world had become a maze, and she was lost in it. After a while, Maya found herself near a small cafe. The smell of coffee wafted through the air, and for a moment, it reminded her of simpler times. She used to come here with Sophie, to talk about life, to share everything that was on their minds. Maybe Sophie could help her now. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The familiar warmth of the cafe was a small comfort, a brief escape from the chaos in her mind. She walked to the counter and ordered a coffee, then sat down at a small table by the window. The minutes ticked by slowly. Maya sipped her coffee, her mind still racing. She had no answers, no plan. But she knew she couldn't give up. Not yet. She had to find out who that man was. And she would. The question was, how? Maya hadn't slept a wink the entire night. The darkness in her apartment had felt suffocating. The walls, which used to offer her comfort, now felt like they were closing in on her. Her thoughts swirled in an endless loop. The man on the train, the unsettling feeling in her gut, the missing phone, it all felt like a web she couldn't escape. Her mind kept returning to one question: why her? She wasn't important. She wasn't some high-profile figure or someone with a history that would attract attention. So why had this stranger singled her out? It made no sense. She didn't want to think she was overreacting, but it seemed impossible that a random encounter had spiraled into this. Maya ran her fingers through her hair, gazing out the window at the busy city streets below. The sunlight, which had been a welcome relief in the morning, now felt like an intrusion, exposing her to the world she didn't want to face. She felt vulnerable, exposed, like a character in someone else's story. She needed to know what the man wanted from her. But how? She had spent the morning retracing her steps in the city, speaking to anyone who might have seen something on the train. No one had. The crowded station, the rush of commuters, they had all moved in their own little bubbles, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in the midst of it all. Maya's phone had never turned up. It was gone. Vanished. She had even gone to the police station, but without any evidence, they couldn't do anything. There were no leads, no proof that she was a victim of theft, let alone some sort of planned encounter. It was the perfect crime in that sense, so subtle that no one would even know it had happened. She was frustrated. She was confused. And she felt increasingly paranoid. There had to be something she was missing. Something important that she wasn't seeing. Maya had tried calling Sophie, but she hadn't been able to reach her. She was alone in this, alone with her suspicions and unanswered questions. That afternoon, as the clock ticked on, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to take matters into her own hands. She had to find out who this man was and why he had come into her life so suddenly. Her gut told her this wasn't just some random encounter. Her phone was gone, but she could still try to track down other ways to find answers. Maybe the train station had surveillance footage. Maybe someone had seen something. She wasn't going to sit here and let it fester. Maya decided to go back to the station. She didn't know what she was looking for, but the city felt more and more like a maze, and the station was the center of it all. She could feel it in her bones, the sense that something important had happened there. Something she hadn't seen. She was nervous, but she didn't care. Fear had taken over a long time ago. It was no longer a question of what might happen, it was a question of what had already happened, and how she was going to deal with it. The train station was less crowded this time. The usual hum of life was still there, but it was quieter. More subdued. She walked up to the ticket booth, hoping to catch the attention of the attendant. "Hi," Maya said, trying to sound calm, though her voice wavered slightly. "I was on a train yesterday, and I think I left something behind. Do you have any surveillance footage? I think it was the 2:15 train." The attendant, a man in his 30s with a tired look in his eyes, glanced up from his computer screen. "We don't usually keep footage for more than 24 hours, ma'am. We just delete it." Maya's stomach dropped. Of course. It was too late. She tried not to let her frustration show. She smiled weakly. "Okay. Thanks anyway." She turned to leave, but something in her gut told her not to walk away just yet. Something wasn't right. The feeling lingered. She paused and glanced around the station once more. Maybe she wasn't looking in the right place. Then, she saw him. It wasn't the man from the train, but he was familiar enough to make her stop dead in her tracks. Standing near one of the benches, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap, was someone she recognized. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The man wasn't just any stranger, he was someone she'd seen before. She had met him years ago, at a friend's party. His name was Ben, and he was an associate of her ex-husband's. She hadn't seen him in years, not since the messy divorce. The memory of him, and the people around him, made her skin crawl. Ben had always been one of those people who existed on the fringes of her life, someone she never paid much attention to. But seeing him now, standing in the same station, felt too coincidental. Ben hadn't been involved in the divorce, but he had connections to her ex. And those connections, well, they were the last people she wanted to think about. But there he was, the past creeping back into her present. Maya took a slow, deliberate step backward, hoping he wouldn't notice her. But it was too late. Ben's eyes locked onto hers, and he didn't look away. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth, though there was something cold behind it. She froze. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone casual but not quite friendly. I was just leaving," Maya said, trying to sound calm. She didn't want to engage, but she couldn't turn away. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I didn't expect to see you, either." Maya's mind raced. Why was he here? What was he doing at the station, of all places? "I'm just passing through," Ben added, taking a step closer to her. "I thought I'd stop by and say hello. It's been a while, right?" Her instincts screamed at her to run, to get away from him, but she couldn't. She stood frozen, barely able to focus on the words he was saying. "You know," Ben said, lowering his voice as if he were sharing a secret, "I've been keeping an eye on you. Funny how small the world is, huh?" Maya felt a chill creep up her spine. Keeping an eye on her? Her stomach churned. He couldn't know. Could he? Ben leaned in closer. "I'm sure you've been wondering what's going on with that phone. I know you've been trying to figure it out." Maya's breath caught. He knew about the phone. How? Her mind was reeling, but she had to hold her ground. "What are you talking about?" Ben's lips curled into a smile, but it was cold, empty. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been watching. You'd be surprised what I can find out when I set my mind to it." Her head spun. She wanted to say something, anything to make sense of the situation, but her mind was foggy. Everything was moving too fast. "What do you want from me?" Maya finally asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. Ben didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped back, surveying her with a calculating gaze. "I think you know exactly what I want. I've been hired to help you figure things out." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Hired? Who hired you?" "That's not something you need to worry about," he said, his smile growing wider. "What matters is that I'm here to help you find your answers." But Maya knew better than to trust him. She knew something was off, something was missing from all of this, and she couldn't let Ben control the narrative. She had to stay one step ahead, no matter how disorienting everything had become. "Why now?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why come to me after all these years?" Ben's smile faded, and he took another step back. "Let's just say, it's complicated. But you'll understand soon enough. Things aren't always what they seem." Maya didn't have time for games. She needed answers, real answers, not cryptic remarks. "I'm done playing these games," Maya said, her voice firm. "If you're really here to help, then prove it. Tell me who's behind this." Ben tilted his head slightly. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough. But for now, enjoy the ride, Maya. It's about to get a lot more interesting." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Every part of her wanted to chase after him, demand more answers. But she didn't. She couldn't. She was one step closer to the truth, but the truth was slipping through her fingers, just out of reach. And the worst part? She wasn't sure if she even wanted to know it anymore. Maya didn't return to her apartment that night. The sense of being trapped in a tangled web, spun around her by people she didn't know, was too much to bear. After Ben had walked away, she felt as though something inside her had snapped, some last thread of normalcy she had been clinging to. Every part of her body screamed for answers, for resolution, but there were none to be had. Instead, she found herself wandering the city streets again. The neon lights of the night seemed colder now, their usual glow unsettling rather than comforting. The city had always been her home, a place of bustling energy and endless possibilities. But tonight, it felt foreign, like a place where she didn't belong. Her mind raced. Ben's words kept echoing in her head. Things aren't always what they seem. It was a cryptic line, one she couldn't shake. But now, it felt like the key to understanding everything: the man on the train, the stolen phone, Ben's sudden reappearance. All of it had to be connected. But how? Maya had no answers. Only questions. She knew she couldn't just walk away from this, not now. She needed to know who was pulling the strings. She needed to know the truth. Her feet carried her aimlessly through the streets until, somehow, she found herself standing in front of the same cafe she'd visited earlier in the day. It was closed now, the shutters down, but the memories of the conversations she'd shared with Sophie, the comfort she'd once felt here, came flooding back. Sophie. Where was she? She had been trying to reach her for days. Was she somehow involved in this mess? Maya stood there, frozen for a moment, before a voice behind her broke the silence. You've been avoiding me. Maya spun around. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Sophie standing a few feet away. The look on her face was unreadable, the usual warmth in her eyes replaced by something colder, harder. I've been trying to get in touch with you, Maya said, her voice shaking. I need to talk to you. It's important. Sophie nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving Maya. I know. I've been watching. And I've been waiting for you to figure it out. Maya's confusion deepened. Figure what out? Sophie stepped closer. You've been in the dark for too long, Maya. It's time you learned the truth. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. Maya had known there was something off about this situation, but Sophie? She was her best friend. They'd shared everything, hadn't they? I don't understand. What do you mean, learn the truth? Maya demanded. You're not making sense. Sophie exhaled sharply, as if struggling with her words. Maya, there's a lot you don't know. A lot I've been keeping from you. But I can't keep it in anymore. You deserve to know what's really been going on. Maya's chest tightened, a wave of nausea rising in her stomach. What are you talking about? Why would you keep things from me? Sophie's eyes softened, but only slightly. I never wanted you to get mixed up in all of this. I never wanted you to find out. But now that you have, I can't protect you anymore. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Protect me from what, Sophie? What's happening? Sophie looked around, making sure no one was listening, and then grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her into an alleyway nearby. This isn't safe to talk about out in the open. I'll tell you everything, but you need to promise me you won't freak out. You need to stay calm. Maya nodded, barely able to hold herself together as she followed Sophie into the shadows. Just tell me what's going on. Sophie looked at her for a long moment, her face tight with something Maya couldn't place. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I've been working with them, Maya. I didn't want to, but I didn't have a choice. Working with who? Maya asked, her voice trembling. Sophie hesitated. The people who've been watching you. The ones behind all of this. The ones who set everything in motion. Maya's mind spun. You mean, you're saying I'm being watched? That this wasn't just some random thing? I don't understand. Sophie's face twisted in regret. You were never supposed to know. It was all supposed to stay quiet. But then you started asking questions. You started digging, and you found out too much. Maya stepped back. What do you mean I found out too much? What have you been hiding from me, Sophie? Sophie took a deep breath, her eyes darting nervously. You remember Ben, don't you? Maya's heart dropped. Ben. I met him years ago. When you were with your ex-husband, Sophie continued, her voice low. I got involved with him, briefly. He and some other people, they were part of a group. A group that's been tracking high-profile targets. Watching people who might have something valuable, information, resources, connections. And, you were one of those targets. Maya felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her. What are you talking about? Why would I? Because of your ex-husband, Sophie interrupted. He wasn't just a businessman, Maya. He was connected to things. Dangerous things. And when you left him, when you started to build a life on your own, they didn't just let you go. Maya's mind reeled as she tried to process what Sophie was saying. You're saying I've been targeted? By a group that wants to use me for something? Sophie nodded grimly. That's exactly what I'm saying. You didn't know it, but they've been keeping tabs on you. That man on the train, he was one of them. He was sent to see if you remembered anything. If you were getting too close to the truth. Maya's breath caught in her throat. And Ben? Why was he here? Sophie's face was unreadable. Ben was the one who helped set this whole thing up. He was watching you, keeping track of your movements. I didn't have a choice. I had to follow orders. Maya's thoughts were a blur. She felt betrayed, confused, and utterly alone. Her best friend, the one person she had trusted most in the world, was involved in this? How could Sophie have kept something so huge from her for so long? You've been lying to me, Maya whispered, the hurt in her voice undeniable. All this time, you've been lying. Sophie's eyes filled with guilt. I didn't want to. But I had no choice, Maya. I couldn't tell you. If I did, they would have come after me. After us. Maya's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the truth. Who are these people? What do they want from me? Sophie exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. They want information. They want access to things your ex-husband had. But they didn't want to take the risk of asking him directly. So, they targeted you. Maya felt like she was suffocating. How do I stop this? How do I make them go away? Sophie's voice faltered. I don't know, Maya. I really don't. They're dangerous. And now that you know, you're a liability. Maya stared at her, every word sinking in like a stone. What do you mean, I'm a liability? Sophie looked away, unable to meet her eyes. You can't be trusted to stay quiet. You're too curious. And that makes you dangerous to them. I'm not sure what they'll do next, but you can't keep digging. You need to stop. Maya felt a cold chill run through her. So what? I just let them win. I just stop everything. Let them walk all over me. Sophie shook her head, looking at her with desperation. I don't know what else to say. I just want you to stay safe. Maya clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. I'm not afraid of them, Maya said, her voice steely. And I'm not going to run. I'm going to find a way to end this. No matter what it takes. For the first time in days, Maya felt a surge of resolve. The web of lies, the manipulation, the threats, they had brought her to this point, but they wouldn't define her. Not anymore. She wasn't going to let anyone control her life. And as for Sophie, she had no idea what side she was on anymore. But Maya knew what she had to do. She was going to expose the truth. No matter the cost.